Get ready to dive deep into one of the most gripping legal battles of our time. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and today we're unraveling the high-stakes drama surrounding one of the music industry's most enigmatic figures, Sean Diddy Combs. In a case that has captivated millions, the courtroom has become a battleground for fame, fortune, and the dark secrets that lurk beneath the glittering surface of celebrity life. As the gavel comes down, we'll explore the allegations, the testimonies, and the shocking twists that could change the course of Diddy's legacy forever. Was this case merely a clash of lifestyles or something much more sinister? With each episode, I will bring you exclusive insights, analysis, and witness testimony accounts that will leave you on the edge of your seat. So buckle up as we embark on this thrilling ride through the trial of the century, where the stakes are high, the drama is real, and the truth is anything but certain. This is the trial of Sean Combs. Let's get started. Welcome back, and before we get into today's episode, since this is the first episode post Memorial Day, I truly hope everyone spent Memorial Day remembering someone who paid the ultimate price so that people like us can enjoy the freedoms we have every single day. And of course, I spent mine remembering Cassie Ventura, who I featured on a special Memorial Day episode. So if you haven't heard that, go check it out. I do also want to extend a very special thank you to John Foster, of course, the star of this year's American Idol, who sent a very special message of remembrance regarding Cassie Ventura, and it took a little doing to get it done and get that request into John's hands. I also want to thank my community here in Louisiana for making sure that that happened. I know the Ventura family appreciates it, and I personally appreciate that as well. Let's get into it, and we're back with the Diddy Trial, and just a quick catch up on what happened the last time court took place, which seems like a million years ago. It was just last Thursday. They took a little break for the Memorial Day holiday, and they're back at it today. Now, on Thursday, rapper Kid Cudi testified about his relationship with Cassie and the abusive nature of her relationship with Sean Combs. Cudi also testified about his car being torched with a Molotov cocktail after his relationship with Ventura ended, and he suspected Combs was involved. He said that he and Ventura stopped seeing each other, noting that the drama was out of hand and he wanted to give her some space. Combs' former assistant, George Kaplan, also testified on Thursday. He described his duties, which included cleaning up liquor bottles and baby oil from hotel rooms, and that was some pretty interesting testimony, to say the least. So we're back to today. It's 8:50 a.m. when Sean Combs arrived at court. He hugged one of his defense attorneys, and they prepared to begin week 3 of this trial. Already 3 weeks in. And the first witness for today is called, and that is Capricorn Clark. Now, let me tell you who Capricorn Clark is. She's the former assistant to Diddy. She was employed with Diddy from 2004, and she worked with him until 2020. Now, there was a break in between that we'll get into during today's trial update. She's a California native. She was employed at some really large labels, including Def Jam, Magic Johnson Enterprises, even BET Films. She moved to New York City in 2000 and later worked at Crossroads, which is a production company. Now, her job at Crossroads was the television production manager. She also handled projects for HBO, ABC, NBC. Following her departure from Crossroads, Capricorn Clark was employed by Combs. There, her duties included handling day-to-day functionality of Diddy's businesses and personal life. As I said, she briefly left Bad Boy Records. At that point, she worked as a strategic and product marketing consultant at Sony. She was assigned to people like Kiara and R. Kelly, of all people. Later, she returned to work with Diddy at the time of the relaunch of Sean John's women's line. Capricorn Clark later served as Diddy's global brand director, and she managed his personal brand as well. Now, at the time, she also worked on productions of Diddy's, including Diddy Dirty Money, The Final Days, and I Want to Work for Diddy. These were all television shows. And interestingly enough, besides her professional relationship with Combs, she also worked for Kid Cudi, who we know just testified in this trial. So let's get into what she had to say. The prosecution approaches the witness box and they start questioning her. And right off the bat, she describes how she was once in fear of her life after Diddy threatened to kill her while discussing Suge Knight. She stated that herself, Combs, and Combs' head of security, a guy by the name of Uncle Polly, were walking through Central Park. This was in New York when Combs brought up Knight. Clark claimed that Combs expressed his anger over learning that she had once worked for Suge Knight. When the prosecution asked Clark if she took the threat as serious, she stated, quote, very serious. She spoke of Combs making threats pointed in the direction of 50 Cent, saying that after Combs and 50 Cent finished doing press for MTV, she was talking to Combs' manager and mentioned to him that Combs was having an issue with 50. Apparently, Combs overheard this and he made a comment to the effect of, quote, I don't like the back and forth. I like guns, which obviously was a threat to 50 Cent. Capricorn went on to tell prosecutors that Combs once accused her of stealing 3 pieces of high-end jewelry that he had been given on loan and subjected her to a lie detector test when it went missing. She stated that Combs had tasked her with bringing the jewelry to an airport, but she didn't realize the items were gone until she got to the airport. Clark said that she was brought to an office she didn't recognize in New York City and was being questioned for hours on the matter. She went on to say a heavyset man on the 6th floor of the building told her that she was there to take a lie detector test and that if she failed, he would throw her into the East River, which is not exactly what you want to do when you're administering a lie detector test. She said the first test was inconclusive and she was threatened again with being thrown into the East River by that man administering the test. She said she was eventually brought home and forced back the next day, saying she was told by Combs security she was not free to leave until she was cleared of any wrongdoing. She went on to say it took 5 days of taking the test. And although she did not want to take the test, she did want to get through the ordeal and prove her innocence. She likened this to a kidnapping. She basically said, I was kidnapped. I didn't want to be there. They forced me there every day. She also discussed the stress involved with working for Sean Combs when she was asked. She said she lost hair and barely slept due to the 24-hour stress of her job working for Combs. All of this for a $55,000 salary, which, when she said how much she got paid, it absolutely shocked me. $55,000. Clark said she regularly worked from 7 a.m. to 4 a.m. doing everything from research to getting Sean Combs dry cleaning to getting his food. The prosecution then asked her to describe some other aspects of her job, and Capricorn said it was to set up hotel rooms for Combs, which she said required drugs and an IV drip. She said she would unpack his clothing and make sure his personal belongings were in place, and that included baby oil and a small camera, and that part of the setup required a toiletry bag with drugs such as ecstasy. Sound familiar? All his assistants testify to this. She said the IVs contained something similar to serotonin supplements that would help Diddy and Cassie recover from drug use. She then recalled a 2010 interaction with Combs at his Los Angeles home when he had questioned her as to why she didn't have a boyfriend. And wait till you hear this. She testified that he then summoned girlfriend Cassie into the room and had her sit down. Then he told her to stand up. Then he told her to turn around, and Cassie would do this on command. She said Combs then turned to her and allegedly added that, quote, "You bitches don't want to do that. And that is why you don't have a man." And obviously, he's referring to the fact that when he tells Cassie to do something, she does it. She doesn't talk back to him. And that is so fucking crazy. Capricorn Clark also spoke of times when Combs asked her to obtain drugs on his behalf, including illicit substances as well as prescription medication. She testified that Combs once asked her to get him cocaine while they were in the south of France. This was in 2006. And she said he also asked her to get prescription drugs in her name and that he would pay for it later. And why is he doing that? No trail to Diddy, right? If she gets it in her name, he'll just reimburse her and nobody can say it was for him. Clark also recalled a 2006 incident at Combs' Miami home when he was forcefully shoving her while saying, quote, "If you hate it here, get the fuck out of my house," unquote. She said of the incident, quote, that it was crossing my boundary. And it was at this point that Capricorn starts tearing up and getting upset on the stand. She had to take a few minutes. The prosecution then turned to some conversation regarding Kid Cudi. And remember, I told you at the beginning, she actually worked for Kid Cudi for a while. And of course, Cassie had a sort of relationship, if you will, with Kid Cudi. He just testified on Thursday and they bring him up. And she spoke of a discussion that she had with Cassie when Cassie first started dating Kid Cudi. She said that she picked up Cassie one day and Cassie asked Kid Cudi to join them, which Clark right off the bat knew this ain't a good idea. She said she was also concerned that Cassie was texting Kid Cudi on a phone that was actually paid for by Combs, and she knew that was a bad idea. She said she then took Cassie immediately to Best Buy to buy a burner phone because she feared that Cassie was, quote, going to get us all killed, unquote. Clark then recalled the morning of December 22nd of 2011 when Combs banged on her apartment door and said they were going to go confront rapper Kid Cudi. Clark said that Combs at this point was visibly furious. She said his pants were split at the crotch as he paced back and forth with a gun. She was quoted in her testimony as saying, "He just said, get dressed, we're going to go kill Miss Cudi," which is Kid Cudi. She went on to say that he had a gun and it was in his hand. Clark said that she was sitting in a car at Kid Cudi's home when Combs accessed the main door of that rapper's property. She said at this point she called Cassie from the car while Combs was inside and told Cassie that Combs came to Kid Cudi's house to kill the rapper. And if you'll remember, Cassie testified to this, and Kid Cudi testified that Cassie had called him about Sean Combs being in his house. She said that Combs came back to the car and asked to see her phone, calling the last number on the call history. She said they were driving away from the home when Combs spotted Kid Cudi traveling in the other direction. Remember, he testified he went straight home when he found out Combs was in there. She said Combs then began chasing Kid Cudi in the vehicle until he heard sirens headed in the direction of Kid Cudi's home. Combs pulled himself together and they drove to a stop at a club on Sunset Boulevard. She said at this point, Combs ordered her to call Cassie and let her know that Combs had her and that he wasn't going to let Clark go until Cassie came to him. Cassie calmly agreed, she said, and Clark went to pick her up. They then, together, returned to Combs' home, where Combs told them to not speak to the police and urged them to convince Cudi to not tell the police that he was involved. Then she discussed what happened after the break-in at Kid Cudi's home. She described a beating that Cassie caught from Combs. She said he repeatedly kicked and beat Cassie. She said at this point he was only wearing a robe and underwear. She then broke down completely on the stand during this testimony. She said that Combs went at Cassie 100% full force, while Cassie was crouched more and more into a fetal position, and that Cassie was crying quietly as Combs kicked her in the back over and over again. She said that Cassie was only a few feet away from her at this time, and she said that Combs told her if she intervened, he would attack her next. And then she added that no one on Combs' security team intervened to stop the attack. And that's just freaking despicable to me that these grown-ass men, security at that, so you know these guys are huge, big, muscled-up guys, and they won't even stop Combs from beating the shit out of this girl right in front of them. I don't care who he is. It's ridiculous. Clark then said she called Regina Ventura, which is Cassie's mother, and said, quote, "He's beating the shit out of your daughter. I'm in over my head. Please help her. I can't call the police, but you can." So after Combs is done beating the shit out of Cassie, he then questions Clark about how much she knew regarding Cassie Ventura's relationship with Kid Cudi. She said on the stand that he was angry and upset and wanted to know when I knew about those two and why she didn't tell him about it. She said Combs then told her, quote, "I should kill you bitches." She went on to say that it was at that point that Combs fired her for failing to inform him about Cassie dating Kid Cudi. She said, quote, "I lost everything," and she ticked off a list of employment benefits such as health insurance and 401k. She said Combs said she would never work again and all these people weren't her friends and he would make her kill herself. And it was at that point the direct examination was completed and the defense started the cross-examination. And they brought up the fact that as recently as April of 2024, Clark was attempting to get her job back with Sean Combs. And Clark conceded that during a meeting last year with Combs' lawyers, Mark Agnafilo and Tini Garagos, she brought up wanting to become Combs' chief of staff. When the defense asked her what type of work she performed for Combs, Clark stated she was hired as a personal assistant. This was in 2004, before eventually becoming a global brand director, saying anything involving his name and likeness fell under her purview. She was asked about working hard for Combs and whether she believed the work she was doing was worthwhile, and she testified that she learned a lot from Combs, especially as someone who didn't finish her college education. She went on to say she considered it another form of business school, saying that Combs was tenacious and broke glass ceilings. And it was at that point the court recessed for lunch. Now, after lunch, the defense continued the cross of Capricorn Clark, and they presented her with some emails from her work at Bad Boy Records from January 2012, which is just 3 weeks after she said in direct examination that she was kidnapped by Combs and forced to take lie detectors for several days. When asked if she continued conducting business with Combs even after telling the jury she was kidnapped and threatened with murder, Clark responded, yes. Then the defense turned back to the Kid Cudi incidents. And she admitted she didn't help the Los Angeles fire investigators in their probe of Kid Cudi's car getting torched. When a Los Angeles Fire Department rep called her in the summer of 2012, Clark hung up on the investigator and never called back, and the defense asked her why. And Clark responded with the quote, "I simply didn't want to have anything to do with this any longer." So at that point, defense attorney Mark Agnafilo, he then enters an email Clark sent to Combs in September of 2014 into evidence when Clark was asking Sean Combs for his forgiveness. Now, this email was sent 2 years after Combs fired Capricorn Clark and about 2 years before she returned to work for him again. And in that email, Clark wrote that hopefully Combs will forgive her soon and that she felt like he forgave everyone but her. And other emails were also brought up in court, including one from months later where Clark said she wanted to be his friend again. Clark seemed angry with Cassie Ventura in that particular email, saying she was clearly never a real friend. And Clark then breaks down, sobbing in court on that witness stand, and she said the situation was complicated for her and that she felt like she was Ventura's protector. So the defense at this point, they bring up singer Rihanna. We all know Rihanna, right? And they ask Capricorn if she's ever went on vacation with Rihanna. And she confirmed that she had been on a vacation with Rihanna. And they really had no other questions about that. But there has to be something here as to why the defense would bring up Rihanna. Seems like they're trying to set up something that relates to her. We just don't know what yet. The defense then wrapped up the cross, and the prosecution gets up and they want to do some redirect. And the first thing they do is they ask her about a settlement she received after Combs fired her in 2012. And she testifies that the settlement required mutual non-disparagement agreements. And before I go any further, I just want to say something on that. Non-disparagement agreements, I cannot stand them. I hate them. I despise them. They suck in contracts. If you sign a non-disparagement, it means if someone totally screws you over, just robs, steals from you, whatever, you're agreeing that legally you cannot ever say anything about them or you can get sued. Whether it is true or not, it should be illegal to even have non-disparagement agreements. But I'm on a tangent there. But she did state that in that settlement, there was a mutual non-disparagement. And also in that settlement was a request for Combs to sign a letter of recommendation for Clark. But she said Combs never signed that recommendation letter. And she claimed she couldn't get a job in the industry after that. She also said that she was told one time in a meeting with executives from Interscope Records to leave Combs alone or it wouldn't end well for her. And that's not what you want to hear from a large record label, for sure.
Hey everyone, let me tell you about my good friend Kelly. She's a proud Louisiana high school teacher from right here in the Bayou State. And in 2022, she launched Unspeakable, a true crime podcast by Kelly Jennings. Armed with a master's degree in criminal justice, her vast experience in law enforcement, and her sassy, fiery attitude, Unspeakable has risen to one of the top true crime podcasts globally. And I am proud to say she is one of my dear friends. Kelly, sum up your podcast for me.
On Unspeakable, I focus on the victims of the crimes and not the perpetrator. I want to be the victim's voice. That's why Victims First is not just a slogan for me. It's much more than that. And it's why I launched the podcast. And every case I cover centers around that belief. The victims matter. I draw from nearly 2 decades of experience in law enforcement to tell these stories. They are real crimes with real victims.
Unspeakable, a true crime podcast by Kelly Jennings, can be found wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting unspeakablethepodcast.com. Unspeakable is an Envision Podcast Studios production.
Clark testified that she continued to look for work through 2015, but wasn't able to find a new job in the industry because she was, quote, blacklisted. At that point, the defense objected, and that objection was sustained. Not really sure why. She said she wasn't able to find any steady work in the entertainment industry, so she started consulting, saying, quote, at this level of business, he holds all the power as it relates to me. And with that, Capricorn Clark completed her testimony, left the stand, and the jury was dismissed as court was adjourned for the day. And I do have a couple of quick announcements. First, the new podcast that I am doing with award-winning true crime podcaster Kelly Jennings, titled Crime Wire Weekly. We've dropped episodes on our own individual feeds. You've heard 3 episodes of it on this feed you're listening to right now. Most everybody seems to be enjoying this. We're certainly going to continue with it, but it will be moving to its own home on its own feed, and that feed is already up. So make sure you follow it. Now, in the description of this podcast, all you got to do is go down, you can click it, and I have the links to both the Spotify and the Apple Podcast versions of this podcast. So if you listen on either one of those, just click the link and then follow the show. You'll be alerted as episodes drop. Same thing you do now here. And there's no cost, of course, to follow a show. But if you're enjoying it and you'd like to hear more after this week, that's the only way you're going to hear it. We will drop one episode on each of our individual feeds this Friday. Now, that show is going to air every Friday, Crime Wire Weekly, and we just discuss the headlines of the week as it relates to true crime. We have a lot of fun with it, so check that out. And another way you can find that individual feed that's already been set up, just go to wherever you're listening now and search Crime Wire Weekly, and it'll pull up. Also, several people have been asking about how they can donate to Lisa Frankowski's Memorial Fund. Of course, that fund goes to some phenomenal local projects where she's from in New York. Just go to that podcast. In the description, it'll contain links to the Venmo and the PayPal for that fund. And certainly they appreciate any donations, and it's going to an absolutely fabulous cause. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, I'm Jim Chapman, your host of Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. Much love.
Thank you.